The morning sun cast long shadows across the peaceful farming colony of Haven 7 as Sarah Chen watched her twin children, Marcus and Elena, chase butterflies through the wheat fields. At 8 years old, they had never known war or violence. Their laughter echoed across the valley, mixing with the gentle hum of agricultural drones working the land. Sarah smiled, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of synthetic coffee. The scar running from her left temple to her jaw had faded over the years, but it still served as a reminder of the life she had left behind. Here on Haven 7, she was just another farmer, another colonist trying to build something peaceful in the Outer Rim territories. The Terran Federation had granted her this new identity 10 years ago, when she requested discharge from military service. General Sarah Iron Fist Chen had become Sarah Martinez, widow and single mother of 2 adopted children. The galaxy knew General Chen had died in a transport accident. Only a handful of people knew the truth. She had been the youngest general in Federation history, the architect of the siege of Kepler Station, the woman who had broken the back of 3 different alien insurgencies. Her tactical brilliance had earned her respect and fear across known space. But when the war ended, she wanted only one thing: to give Marcus and Elena the childhood she had never had. The children had come to her through tragedy. Their parents had died in a pirate raid on a transport ship. Sarah had been the commanding officer who rescued the survivors. And when she saw the 2 frightened children clinging to each other in the evacuation shuttle, something in her heart had broken and mended at the same time. "Mom, look what I found," Elena called out, running toward the farmhouse with a strange purple flower in her hands. Marcus followed close behind, his face flushed with excitement. "Be careful with that, sweetheart," Sarah called back. "Some of the native plants here can be poisonous." She had chosen Haven 7 specifically because it was so remote. The planet sat on the very edge of human space, far from the trade routes and military installations. The Galactic Empire, humanity's greatest enemy, had signed a peace treaty with the Federation 5 years ago. The borders were respected. This sector was supposed to be safe. The communicator on her wrist buzzed softly. Sarah glanced at it and frowned. The message was from her neighbor, old Tom Harrison, who lived on the next farm over. "Sarah, you might want to look at the sky. Something's not right." She stepped away from the porch and tilted her head upward. At first she saw nothing unusual. The pale blue sky was dotted with white clouds, same as always. Then she spotted them. 3 dark specks moving in formation, too high to be atmospheric craft, too organized to be meteors. Her blood ran cold. Those were ships. Large ones. Sarah's mind instantly shifted into tactical mode, even as her heart hammered with a mother's fear. She counted the specks again. 3 heavy cruisers, probably Imperial design based on their formation pattern. They were moving slowly, deliberately, like predators circling their prey. "Marcus, Elena, inside now," she called, trying to keep the urgency out of her voice. The children looked up from their game, confused by the sharp tone. They had never heard their mother speak like that before. "But Mom, we just started playing," Marcus protested. "Inside, right now." The command came out harder than she intended. Both children's eyes widened and they hurried toward the house. Sarah's communicator buzzed again. This time it was an emergency broadcast from the Planetary Defense Network. "Attention all residents of Haven 7. Unidentified vessels have entered our system. This is not a drill. Proceed to your designated emergency shelters immediately. Repeat, this is not a drill." Her hands shook as she opened the hidden panel beneath the kitchen table. Inside was a compact military communication array, still connected to Federation emergency channels. She activated it with her old authorization codes, praying they still worked. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the tactical situation in orbit. 3 Imperial Dominion heavy cruisers had indeed entered the system, but there was something wrong with their approach vector. They weren't heading for the main population centers or the spaceport. They were coming straight for the agricultural districts, straight for her farm. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. After 10 years of hiding, somehow they had found her. But how? She had been so careful, so paranoid about operational security. Her new identity was bulletproof, created by Federation intelligence themselves. "Mom, what's happening?" Elena's voice was small and frightened. Sarah looked at her children. These 2 innocent souls who had never hurt anyone, who spent their days learning about plants and animals and dreaming of becoming explorers when they grew up. They were looking at her with complete trust, believing that their mother could fix whatever was wrong. She could. But the cost would be everything she had built here. "We're going to play a game," she said, forcing her voice to remain calm. "We're going to hide in the special room downstairs, and we're going to be very, very quiet." "Can you do that for me?" Both children nodded solemnly. They had practiced hiding games before, though they had never understood why their mother insisted on having a hidden bunker beneath their farmhouse. As she led them down into the reinforced shelter, Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The Imperial ships could be here for routine patrol, but their direct approach suggested otherwise. They could be deserters or pirates using stolen ships, but the formation was too disciplined, or they could be here because someone had figured out who she really was. The bunker's displays showed the ships, beginning their descent toward the planet's surface. Sarah sealed the blast doors and activated the stealth systems. The shelter was designed to be invisible to most scanning technologies, hidden beneath layers of concrete and electromagnetic shielding. She knelt down in front of Marcus and Elena, taking their small hands in hers. "Listen to me very carefully," she said. "No matter what happens up there, no matter what sounds you hear, you stay in this room until I come back for you. Do you understand?" "Are the bad guys coming?" Marcus asked. Sarah's throat tightened. "Maybe, but I won't let them hurt you. I promise." She had made that same promise to their dying mother 10 years ago. She had sworn on her own life that these children would be safe, that they would grow up free and happy. Now that promise was about to be tested. The ground shook as the Imperial ships landed in the field surrounding Sarah's farm. Through the bunker's periscope system, she watched 3 massive vessels settle into the wheat fields like predatory birds. Each ship was the size of a city block, their dark hulls bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Sarah's hands moved automatically across the control panels, activating every passive sensor she had. The readings made her stomach drop. These weren't just any Imperial ships. The markings identified them as vessels from the Hegemony's 47th Punishment Fleet, elite units used for what the Empire euphemistically called corrective actions. Genocide, in other words. "Mom, I'm scared," Elena whispered from her corner of the bunker. "It's okay, baby. Just stay quiet for a little while longer." Sarah pulled up the tactical readouts on her hidden screens. Each ship carried approximately 2,000 soldiers, along with atmospheric fighters and ground assault vehicles. This wasn't a reconnaissance mission or even a standard raid. This was a full military operation. The first soldiers emerged from the ships like a black tide. Their armor was unmarked except for the crimson death's head that marked punishment fleet units. These weren't regular Imperial troops. These were the Empire's cleaners, the ones they sent when they wanted to make sure nothing survived. Sarah watched them spread out across the farmland with professional efficiency. Some headed toward Tom Harrison's farm to the north. Others moved toward the Henderson family's place to the south. A third group marched directly toward her house. Her finger hovered over the emergency transmission switch. One press would send a distress signal to the nearest Federation outpost, but it would also reveal her location to anyone monitoring communications. The children would be safe in the bunker for now. But if the Empire detected Federation military codes coming from a supposedly dead general, they would never stop looking. The decision was made for her when the first explosions lit up the horizon. Tom Harrison's farm disappeared in a ball of orange flame. Sarah's enhanced sensors detected the thermal signature of plasma bombardment, the kind of weapons used to sterilize entire continents. The Empire wasn't taking prisoners. They weren't looking for information. They were killing everyone. Her hands flew across the communication panel, activating the old military channels with her general's codes. The Federation needed to know what was happening here, even if it meant revealing her identity. "This is General Sarah Chen. Authorization code Omega 77 Alpha," she transmitted on the emergency frequency. "Haven 7 is under attack by Imperial punishment fleet vessels. They are conducting systematic extermination of civilian populations. Require immediate assistance." The response came back within seconds, filled with static but unmistakably human. "General Chen? Ma'am, you're supposed to be dead. Where are you transmitting from?" "That's not important right now, soldier. What is important is that there are 3,000 innocents on this planet about to be murdered. How long until the nearest fleet can reach us?" A pause. Then, "Nearest Federation forces are 6 days out, ma'am." "I'm sorry," Sarah closed her eyes. 6 days. The Imperial forces would be finished with their work in 6 hours. Through the periscope, she watched the soldiers reach her farmhouse. They moved with the practiced efficiency of an extermination squad, checking every room, every corner, every possible hiding place. When they didn't find anyone inside, they began setting incendiary charges. Her life for the past 10 years went up in flames. The kitchen where she had made breakfast for her children every morning. The living room where they had read stories together every night. The small bedrooms where Marcus and Elena had slept safely, dreaming of becoming scientists and explorers. All of it burned, but the soldiers weren't satisfied. Sarah's enhanced hearing picked up their communications through the bunker's acoustic sensors. They were speaking in Imperial Standard, but she understood every word. Thermal scans show the building was recently occupied, one soldier reported. 3 life forms, 2 small, 1 adult. They couldn't have gone far. Expand search radius, came the reply. Command wants this sector completely clean. No survivors. Sarah's blood turned to ice. They knew about the children. Somehow they had detected heat signatures or movement patterns that revealed Marcus and Elena's presence. More explosions echoed across the valley as other farms met the same fate. The Henderson family, the Kowalskis, the Patels, all of them families who had come to Haven 7 looking for peace and safety. All of them dying because someone in the Empire had decided this planet needed to be eliminated. The soldiers outside began using deep penetration scanners, devices designed to detect underground structures. Sarah watched the readings spike as they methodically worked their way across her property. It was only a matter of time before they found the bunker. She looked at Marcus and Elena huddled together in the corner. They were trying so hard to be brave, to follow their mother's instructions to stay quiet. But she could see the terror in their eyes, the way they flinched with every explosion outside. 10 years ago, she had walked away from the war. She had hung up her uniform, buried her weapons, and sworn that she would never again be responsible for sending people to their deaths. She had promised herself that she would be a mother, not a killer, but the Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had come for her children. Sarah moved to the bunker's emergency weapons locker, her fingers dancing over the biometric locks. Inside were items she had hoped never to touch again. A military-grade plasma rifle, 2 sidearms, combat armor, and enough ammunition to outfit a squad. There was something else too. A small black device that she had kept as a memento of her military service. It looked harmless enough, about the size of a communication tablet, but it contained the complete tactical archives of every major Imperial military operation for the past 20 years. Battle plans, fleet movements, defensive positions, command codes, everything she had gathered during her years of warfare. Mom? Marcus had noticed her moving around the weapons locker. What are those? Sarah knelt down beside her children one more time. When she spoke, her voice carried a hardness that neither child had ever heard before. I need you to stay here no matter what happens. The Federation will come for you eventually, but it might take a few days. There's food and water in the storage compartments, and the bunker will keep you safe. Can you be brave for me? Where are you going? Elena asked, tears starting to form in her eyes. Sarah's hand touched the scar on her face, remembering how she had gotten it. An Imperial blade wielded by a soldier who had been torturing captured civilians. She had taken that blade away from him and used it to carve her initials into his forehead before she killed him. I'm going to make sure the bad guys never hurt anyone ever again. She began putting on the combat armor, each piece fitting like it had never been removed. The weapons came next, checked and loaded with automatic precision. Finally, she activated the tactical computer in her helmet, linking it to the bunker's sensor network. The readings showed 47 Imperial soldiers now surrounding her property, with more arriving every minute. Their formation was textbook perfect, exactly what she would have expected from elite troops. But they had made one crucial error. They thought they were hunting a frightened farmer and her children. They had no idea they had just cornered the most dangerous human being in the galaxy. Sarah emerged from the hidden bunker like death itself, moving through the smoke and flames of her burning home with predatory silence. The combat armor felt natural on her body, as if the 10 years of peaceful farming had been nothing more than a brief dream. Her plasma rifle was set to maximum power, each shot capable of punching through Imperial battle armor like paper. The first soldier never saw her coming. He was crouched behind what remained of her garden shed, scanning the area with thermal imaging equipment. Sarah's blade found the gap between his helmet and chest armor. sliding between vertebrae with surgical precision. He died without making a sound. The second soldier was more alert, but not alert enough. Sarah's plasma bolt caught him center mass as he turned to investigate his partner's disappearance. The superheated energy turned his armor into molten slag and his body into vapor. Contact. We have contact in Grid 7. Someone screamed over the Imperial communication network. Sarah smiled grimly as she moved through the ruins of her property. They had no idea what they were dealing with. These soldiers were used to fighting farmers and miners, not military professionals. They bunched up when they should have spread out. They called out positions when they should have stayed silent. They followed predictable patterns when facing the unknown. They fought like amateurs. Sarah had spent 20 years fighting the Empire's best troops. She knew their doctrine, their training, their weaknesses. She had written half the Federation's tactical manuals on Imperial combat behavior. These soldiers might be elite by Empire standards, but they were children compared to what she had faced during the war. A squad of 6 soldiers approached her position in a standard search formation. Sarah let them get within 10 meters before she acted. The plasma grenades she had retrieved from the bunker did their work efficiently, turning the squad into scattered particles and twisted metal. Unknown hostile has military-grade weapons. Came another panicked transmission, requesting immediate backup. Sarah was already moving, using the smoke from the burning buildings as cover. Her tactical display showed the enemy positions in real time, fed by the sensors she had hidden around her property years ago. 52 soldiers now arranged in 3 concentric circles around the farmhouse. They thought they were hunting one person. They were about to learn the difference between fighting civilians and fighting a professional soldier. The third engagement came when she flanked around the Henderson farm ruins. A full platoon of Imperial troops was advancing through the wheat fields, their heavy weapons trained on her last known position. Sarah had already moved 300 meters to their left flank. She opened fire from concealment, her plasma rifle cutting through their ranks like a scythe through grain. The survivors scattered, but there was nowhere to run on the open plain. Sarah's shots found them one by one, precise and methodical. She had learned long ago that in war, mercy was a luxury that got good people killed. Her communicator crackled with an incoming transmission from the Imperial command ship. This is Colonel Vash of the 47th Punishment Fleet. You will surrender immediately or we will level this entire continent. Sarah switched to the open communication channel, making sure every Imperial soldier could hear her response. This is General Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation. You have exactly 10 minutes to evacuate this planet before I start killing your commanders. The silence that followed was so profound that Sarah could hear the wind blowing through the burning wheat fields. Then, impossible. General Chen is dead. Your intelligence reports were incorrect, Colonel. I am very much alive and you have just made the worst mistake of your military career. You attacked human civilians under my protection. That makes this personal. Sarah could almost feel the panic spreading through the Imperial ranks. Every soldier in the galaxy knew who General Sarah Chen was. The Iron Fist, the butcher of Kepler Station. The woman who had single-handedly destroyed an entire Imperial battle group during the Battle of Proxima 7. She had been the Federation's most decorated officer, feared by enemies and respected by allies. Her tactical genius was taught in military academies across human space. Her ruthlessness in combat was legendary, and now they had awakened her. The Imperial response was swift and predictable. Atmospheric fighters screamed overhead, raining plasma fire down on the farm complex. The bombardment turned the landscape into a hellscape of molten earth and burning vegetation. But Sarah was no longer there. She had moved into the network of irrigation tunnels that connected all the farms in the valley. These passages had been designed for maintenance access, but they made perfect cover for someone who knew how to use terrain to their advantage. Sarah's tactical computer was tracking the movements of every Imperial unit. The fighters were operating in standard close air support patterns. The ground troops were advancing in textbook formations. Their commanders were following doctrine exactly as they had been trained. That was their mistake. Sarah knew Imperial doctrine better than the Imperials did. She emerged from the tunnel system behind the Imperial command post, a hastily erected structure near the landing zone. The guards were facing outward, watching for threats from the burning farms. They never thought to look behind them. Sarah's plasma rifle spoke 6 times in rapid succession. 6 guards died before their bodies hit the ground. She was inside the command post before anyone could react. The Imperial officers were hunched over tactical displays, trying to coordinate the search for a single terrorist. They looked up in shock as Death walked through their door. "Gentlemen," Sarah said conversationally, "we need to talk." Colonel Vash was a typical Imperial officer, arrogant, well-bred, and completely unprepared for real combat. He reached for his sidearm with the kind of sluggish movement that marked someone who had never fought for his life. Sarah's bolt took his hand off at the wrist. "Wouldn't do that if I were you," she advised, as the colonel screamed and collapsed to his knees. "Now you're going to tell me exactly why you're here, and you're going to tell me who ordered this attack." The other officers in the command post were frozen with terror. They had heard the stories about what General Chen did to prisoners who didn't cooperate. "The lucky ones died quickly. You can't be here," one of them stammered. "This is impossible. Our intelligence said—" "Your intelligence said I was dead," Sarah finished. "Your intelligence was wrong. Now answer my question, or I start removing pieces of you until someone decides to talk." Colonel Vash was trying to apply emergency medical treatment to his severed wrist, but his hands were shaking too badly to activate the field dressings. Blood was pooling on the floor beneath him. "Please," he gasped. "We were just following orders. The Hegemony Council wanted this sector cleared for a new industrial project. We didn't know you were here. We would never have—" "You would never have what?" Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. "Murdered innocent families? Killed children who had never hurt anyone? Burned down homes and schools and medical centers?" She studied the tactical displays around her, noting the positions of all Imperial forces. 96 soldiers on the ground plus the air support units. A significant force, but nothing she couldn't handle if she played it smart. "Here's what's going to happen," she told the surviving officers. "You're going to call off your troops and evacuate this planet immediately. Every Imperial soldier, every ship, every piece of equipment, gone within the hour." "We can't do that," another officer protested. "Our orders come directly from the Hegemony Council. We have to complete the mission." Sarah's second shot vaporized his head. "Anyone else want to discuss mission parameters?" she asked pleasantly. The remaining Imperial officers stared at their headless colleague in stunned silence. Blood was still dripping from the walls where his head had been before Sarah's plasma bolt erased it from existence. Colonel Vash had gone into shock, his face white as paper as he clutched his severed wrist. "I don't think you understand the situation," Sarah said calmly, stepping over the body as if it were nothing more than debris. "Let me explain it to you in terms that even Imperial officers can comprehend." She activated the command post's main display, linking it to her tactical computer. The screen showed a real-time overview of the entire star system, including the positions of all Imperial vessels and ground forces. "You came here to commit genocide against human civilians. That was your first mistake." Sarah's finger traced along the display, highlighting the Imperial ships in orbit. "Your second mistake was not doing proper intelligence gathering before the operation. Your third mistake was assuming that a dead general would stay dead." One of the younger officers, a lieutenant by his rank insignia, was trying to edge toward a weapon. Sarah's sidearm appeared in her hand as if by magic. The barrel pressed against his temple before he could complete his first step. "Your fourth mistake," she continued without missing a beat, "was thinking that you could kill my children and live to tell about it." "Your children?" Colonel Vash managed to gasp through his pain. "Marcus and Elena Chen, 8 years old. They were playing in my wheat fields this morning, chasing butterflies and learning about the native plants. They have never hurt anyone. They don't even know what war is." Sarah's voice remained conversational, but her eyes had gone completely cold. "You tried to murder them." The tactical display showed Imperial ground forces beginning to regroup around the command post. They had realized that their headquarters was compromised and they were moving to retake it. Standard Imperial doctrine called for overwhelming force in such situations. Sarah smiled, and every officer in the room felt their blood turn to ice. "Your commanders out there are probably wondering how one person could cause this much damage," she said. "Let me show you something that might enlighten them." She connected her personal tactical computer to the Imperial communication network using command codes that she had memorized years ago. The hack took less than 30 seconds. Imperial cybersecurity was notoriously weak, designed more to keep their own people in line than to prevent external intrusion. Suddenly, every Imperial soldier on the planet was listening to the conversation in the command post. "This is General Sarah Chen addressing all Imperial forces on Haven 7, she announced. "I want you to understand exactly who you're dealing with." Computer display service record. Her military history appeared on every Imperial tactical display simultaneously. 20 years of service. 47 major engagements. Over 300 confirmed strategic victories. Casualty ratios that defied belief. She had never lost a battle, never retreated from an enemy position, never failed to complete a mission. "The Battle of Kepler Station," she continued as if giving a lecture. 4 Imperial dreadnoughts and 12 cruisers defeated by a single Federation task force under my command. Total Imperial casualties 86,000. Federation casualties 412. The silence on the communication network was deafening. The siege of Proxima 7. "Your Hegemony Council sent 3 full battle fleets to break our defensive positions. I held that system for 8 months with a force 1/10 the size of yours. When the siege ended, I had captured 2 Imperial admirals, destroyed over 400 ships, and forced your empire to sue for peace." Sarah could see the tactical displays showing Imperial soldiers beginning to hesitate in their advance. Some of them were actually backing away from the command post. The Iron Fist campaign through the Arcturus sector. 47 Imperial strongholds eliminated in 6 months. Your commanders started calling me the Death of Stars because entire systems would surrender rather than face me in battle, Colonel. Vash was staring at her with the kind of expression normally reserved for natural disasters or acts of God. You're actually her. The real Iron Fist." "I tried to leave that life behind," Sarah said quietly. "I came to this planet to raise my children in peace. I wanted them to grow up in a world where they never had to see violence or war. I wanted to be a mother, not a killer." She gestured toward the burning farms visible through the command post windows. "But you couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? You had to come here and destroy everything I built. You had to try to murder innocent children. You had to make this personal." The tactical display showed that the Imperial ground forces had stopped their advance entirely. Some units were actually retreating toward their landing ships. Word was spreading through the ranks about exactly who they were facing. Sarah activated the communication system again, this time addressing the Imperial fleet in orbit. "Imperial vessels, this is General Sarah Chen. You have 30 minutes to evacuate all personnel from the surface and jump out of this system. If you are still here after that deadline, I will consider it an act of war against the Terran Federation." The response came from the fleet commander, Admiral Corax, whose voice carried the arrogance typical of Imperial nobility. "General Chen, you are one person with limited resources on a backwater planet. We have 3 heavy cruisers with full complements of troops and fighters. Surrender now and we may allow you to live." Sarah's laugh was genuinely amused. "Admiral, let me share something with you. Computer, access Imperial Tactical Database Authorization Chen Alpha 77. To everyone's amazement, the code still worked. The Imperial military computer accepted her authorization and began displaying classified battle analyses on every screen in the command post. "These are your own intelligence reports on my military capabilities," Sarah explained. "Written by your best tactical analysts after the war ended. I think you'll find them educational." The reports painted a picture of a military genius who treated warfare like a chess game played with human lives. Statistical analyses showed that Imperial forces under her command had a survival rate of less than 12%. Psychological profiles described her as ruthlessly efficient and completely without mercy for enemies who threatened civilians. One report, marked with the highest classification level, contained a simple recommendation. Under no circumstances should Imperial forces engage General Chen in direct combat. If confronted by Chen, immediate withdrawal is advised. Admiral Corax's voice came back over the communication system, noticeably less confident than before. "You're bluffing. One person cannot threaten 3 capital ships." Sarah walked over to the command post's weapon control station and began entering commands with practiced efficiency. "Admiral, do you see those defensive satellites in orbit around Haven 7? The ones your intelligence reports classified as obsolete mining equipment." A pause, then, "What about them?" "They're not mining equipment." Sarah's finger hovered over the activation switch. During her years on Haven 7, she had spent her spare time building a network of defensive platforms disguised as civilian infrastructure. Each satellite contained enough firepower to cripple a heavy cruiser. The Empire had never detected them because they looked exactly like the orbital mining platforms used throughout human space. Computer, activate Orbital Defense Network Omega. Authorization Chen 77 Alpha. High above the planet, 73 hidden weapons platforms came online simultaneously. Their targeting systems locked onto the 3 Imperial cruisers, and every weapon bay opened to reveal military-grade plasma cannons and antimatter torpedoes. The Imperial fleet's tactical officers started screaming warnings, but it was too late. Sarah had just revealed that she had enough firepower in orbit to destroy a dozen fleets, let alone 3 cruisers. You now have 29 minutes to evacuate, she said pleasantly. I suggest you start moving. The Imperial fleet's response was immediate and predictable. Admiral Korax, faced with the choice between retreat and annihilation, chose the path that every Imperial commander had learned during the war. Avoid direct confrontation with Sarah Chen at all costs. All ships, begin emergency evacuation procedures, came the order over the communication network. Ground forces return to landing zones immediately. We are withdrawing from this system. Sarah watched the tactical displays with professional satisfaction as the Imperial soldiers began their panicked retreat. These were supposed to be elite troops, the Empire's best, but they were running like scared children. The mere mention of her name had been enough to break their morale completely. Colonel Vash, still bleeding from his severed wrist, looked up at her with a mixture of terror and confusion. "You're going to let us leave?" he asked weakly. Sarah's expression didn't change. "Did I say that?" The colonel's face went white. "But you gave us 30 minutes to evacuate." "I gave your ships 30 minutes to evacuate," Sarah corrected. "I never said anything about the people responsible for murdering my neighbors." She moved to the command post's central computer and began accessing the Imperial personnel records. Names, faces, and service histories scrolled across the displays as she compiled a list of every officer and soldier involved in the attack on Haven 7. "Let me tell you what's going to happen," she said, conversationally, still typing. "Your ships are going to leave because I don't want to deal with the political complications of destroying Imperial capital vessels. But the people who participated in this genocide are not going home." She pulled up the tactical readout showing Imperial forces retreating across the burning farmlands. Hundreds of soldiers were running toward their landing ships, abandoning equipment and wounded comrades in their haste to escape. Computer, target all personnel currently fleeing toward Imperial landing zones. Mark targets for precision elimination. The orbital weapons platforms adjusted their aim, switching from ship-killing plasma cannons to smaller, more precise beam weapons. Each satellite could track and eliminate individual targets from orbit with surgical accuracy. General Chen, one of the surviving officers in the command post, stammered, "What you're proposing is a war crime. The Galactic Convention prohibits the execution of retreating enemy forces." Sarah turned to look at him, and her smile was colder than deep space. "The Galactic Convention also prohibits the genocide of civilian populations," she replied. "Your forces violated that treaty the moment they landed on this planet. You murdered families. You killed children. You burned down homes and schools and hospitals." She gestured toward the window, where the smoke from burning farms darkened the sky. "Every man who participated in this attack has forfeited his right to mercy. Every officer who gave these orders has earned a death sentence. And every ship that brought them here has become a legitimate military target." The communication system crackled with desperate transmissions from the retreating Imperial forces. "Command, we need immediate air support. There's some kind of targeting system painting us from orbit. Negative on air support. All fighters are needed for fleet defense. Continue evacuation procedures." "But sir, they're going to kill us all." "That's not our problem anymore. You're on your own down there." Sarah shook her head in disgust. Imperial commanders were notorious for abandoning their own troops when situations became difficult. These soldiers had thought they were part of an elite unit, but their officers were already writing them off as acceptable losses. "It must be difficult," she said to Colonel Vash, "knowing that your superiors care so little about your lives." The colonel was trying to use his remaining hand to activate an emergency beacon, but Sarah's blade flicked out and severed those fingers as well. He screamed and collapsed backward, both hands now useless stumps. "I wouldn't bother with that," she advised. "Your fleet is already calculating jump coordinates. They'll be gone within the hour, with or without you." Through the command post's window, Sarah could see the Imperial soldiers reaching their landing ships. The vessels were massive transport craft, each capable of carrying a full battalion. Under normal circumstances, they would provide safety and protection for the evacuating troops. But these were not normal circumstances. Computer, commence precision orbital bombardment. Target all Imperial personnel involved in civilian casualties. Exclude ship crews needed for evacuation. The sky lit up with threads of plasma fire as the hidden satellites began their work. Each beam was no thicker than a human finger, but they carried enough energy to instantly vaporize a person in full combat armor. The orbital platforms tracked individual soldiers as they ran across the farmlands, eliminating them with mechanical precision. Sarah watched dispassionately as hundreds of Imperial troops simply ceased to exist. There were no explosions, no dramatic deaths, just silent beams of light that erased people from existence. It was clean, efficient, and completely ruthless. "My God," one of the remaining officers whispered. "You're actually doing it. You're killing them all." "They came here to commit genocide," Sarah replied without emotion. "They succeeded in murdering dozens of innocent families. Now they're paying the price for their actions." The Imperial landing ships were attempting to take off with whatever troops had already reached them, but Sarah's orbital platforms were targeting the vessels as well. Not to destroy them completely, she needed some survivors to carry word back to the Empire, but to disable their defensive systems and damage their engines. One transport tried to provide covering fire for the fleeing soldiers, but its plasma cannons were no match for military-grade orbital weapons. Sarah's satellites carved through its armor plating like paper, systematically destroying every weapon system and engine mount. Colonel Vash was staring at the tactical displays in horror. The readouts showed Imperial casualties climbing into the hundreds, then thousands. Entire companies were being eliminated faster than their commanders could track. "This is insane," he gasped. "You can't kill this many people over a few dead farmers." Sarah's hand closed around his throat, lifting him off the ground with surprising strength. Her voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any scream. "Those farmers had names," she said. "Tom Harrison, who taught my children how to identify edible plants. Maria Gonzalez, who helped deliver supplies during the winter storms. The Patel family, who invited us to their daughter's wedding last year." She tightened her grip, and the colonel's feet began kicking desperately. Marcus and Elena played with the Henderson children every weekend. They were going to attend the same school next year. They had friends here, people who cared about them, a life that was peaceful and happy. Colonel Vash's face was turning purple, but Sarah wasn't finished. "You tried to murder my children. You succeeded in murdering their friends. You burned down everything they loved and called it military necessity." Her grip tightened further. "Did you really think I would let you live after that?" She released him, and he collapsed to the floor, gasping and clawing at his throat. "But you're not going to die here," she continued. "You're going to survive this encounter, Colonel, and you're going to carry a message back to your Hegemony Council." The tactical displays showed that the orbital bombardment was nearly complete. Of the 3,000 Imperial soldiers who had landed on Haven 7, fewer than 200 were still alive, and most of those were aboard the damaged transport ships trying to escape to orbit. Sarah activated the communication system one final time, addressing the Imperial fleet directly. "Admiral Corax, I trust you're monitoring what's happening to your ground forces." The Admiral's voice came back strained and angry. "General Chen, what you're doing is unconscionable. Those men were following orders. Those men were following illegal orders to commit genocide against human civilians. The penalty for such crimes is death, as established by the Galactic Convention that your own empire signed." Sarah pulled up another display showing the current positions of all 3 Imperial cruisers. They were accelerating away from the planet as fast as their engines could manage, but they were still within range of her orbital weapons. "However, I'm going to allow your fleet to escape with the survivors, not out of mercy, but because I want you to deliver a message to your superiors." She began uploading a data packet to the Imperial communication system, using her old military codes to force their computers to accept the transmission. "I'm sending you a complete tactical analysis of this engagement, along with updated intelligence on my current capabilities. Make sure your Hegemony Council understands what happened here today." The data packet contained detailed information about her orbital defense network, her military resources, and most importantly, her current psychological state. Any competent Imperial analyst would conclude that General Sarah Chen had not only survived her supposed death but had spent the intervening years preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. The Terran Federation and the Galactic Empire have a peace treaty, she continued. That treaty will remain in effect as long as Imperial forces stay away from human civilian populations. But if I ever again detect Imperial ships attacking defenseless colonists, if I ever again hear of punishment fleets being used against innocent families, I will consider it an act of war. She paused, letting the implications sink in. And unlike your previous wars with humanity, this one will not end with negotiated settlements or territorial concessions. This one will end with the complete destruction of your empire. Every world, every ship, every installation. I will not stop until the Galactic Empire ceases to exist. The communication channel fell silent. Even Admiral Korax, with all his imperial arrogance, understood that he was listening to a promise, not a threat. Sarah turned back to Colonel Vash, who was still lying on the floor clutching his throat. You, Colonel, are going to be my messenger. You're going to tell your superiors exactly what happened here, and you're going to make sure they understand that this was not a bluff or an empty gesture. This was a demonstration. She knelt down beside him, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The Iron Fist is no longer retired. 3 days later, Sarah stood in the ruins of her farmhouse watching Federation rescue ships land in the valley below. The orbital bombardment had left the landscape scarred and broken, but the hidden bunker had survived intact. Marcus and Elena were safe, though they would carry the psychological scars of what they had witnessed for the rest of their lives. The Federation fleet had arrived exactly when promised, but by then there was nothing left to rescue except survivors and bodies. Sarah had spent the intervening time cataloging the dead, preparing detailed reports and ensuring that every Imperial casualty was documented for the War Crimes Tribunal that would inevitably follow. Colonel, Vash had been transported to the nearest Imperial medical facility aboard one of the damaged landing ships. His injuries would heal, but Sarah had made sure he would never forget what happened on Haven 7. The severed hands were just the beginning. She had also implanted a neural transmitter that would force him to relive the orbital bombardment every time he tried to sleep. Small reminder of the price of genocide. General Chen. Sarah turned to see a young Federation officer approaching through the debris. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Rodriguez was the senior intelligence officer attached to the rescue fleet, and her expression suggested she had questions that needed answers. Lieutenant Commander, Sarah acknowledged. Ma'am, we've completed our preliminary investigation of the Imperial attack. The evidence suggests this was a planned genocide operation targeting human civilians. Rodriguez paused, but we're having trouble understanding how a single person managed to eliminate nearly 3,000 Imperial soldiers. Sarah gestured toward the hidden satellite control station, now partially exposed by the fighting. I spent 10 years preparing for the possibility that the Empire might violate the peace treaty. The orbital defense network was designed to protect human colonies in the Outer Rim territories. Ma'am, with respect, our tactical analysts estimate that your defense grid could have destroyed the entire Imperial fleet. Why did you allow them to escape? It was a reasonable question, and one that Sarah had been expecting. Because destroying the fleet would have been an act of war against the Galactic Empire. Eliminating soldiers who were actively committing genocide against civilians is legally justified under Federation military law. There's a difference. Rodriguez nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. The Federation Council is going to want a full briefing on your capabilities, General. There are questions about how you've been spending your retirement, and whether you've been operating outside official channels. Sarah's smile was thin and dangerous. Lieutenant Commander, I suggest you inform the Federation Council that I am no longer retired. I am returning to active duty, effective immediately. Ma'am, you can't just reactivate yourself. There are procedures, protocols. The procedures can be expedited, Sarah interrupted, especially when the Federation needs someone to deal with the political consequences of what happened here. She was right, and they both knew it. The Empire would demand explanations, reparations, possibly even war crimes proceedings. They would claim that Sarah's response was disproportionate, that the orbital bombardment constituted a massacre rather than legitimate military action. But they would also have to explain why their punishment fleet had been conducting genocide operations in violation of the peace treaty. The Empire made a mistake, Sarah continued. They assumed that because I was officially dead, I was no longer a threat to their interests. They thought they could restart their expansion into human territory without consequences. She walked over to the crater where her house had once stood. Remembering mornings when Marcus and Elena had played in these same fields, they were wrong. And now they're going to learn exactly how wrong they were. Rodriguez followed her, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. General, the Federation can't authorize a one-person war against the Galactic Empire. The political ramifications would be catastrophic. Who said anything about the Federation authorizing it? Sarah's tone was casual, but Rodriguez felt a chill run down her spine. She was beginning to understand that General Sarah Chen was no longer thinking like a Federation officer. She was thinking like someone who had nothing left to lose. Ma'am, you can't be serious. You're talking about taking on an entire galactic empire by yourself. Not by myself, Sarah corrected. I'll have Marcus and Elena to protect. That's all the motivation I need. She activated her personal communicator and began uploading data to the Federation command network. Personnel files, equipment requisitions, and tactical plans began streaming across secured channels. What are you doing? Rodriguez asked. Requesting reactivation to my former rank and position, along with authorization to form a new military unit dedicated to preventing future genocide operations against human civilians. The request was ambitious to the point of insanity. Sarah was asking for command authority over an independent task force with broad operational latitude. She wanted ships, weapons, personnel, and most importantly, the legal authority to operate outside normal Federation oversight. The Council will never approve this, Rodriguez protested. They will, Sarah said confidently, because the alternative is me operating completely outside Federation authority. And trust me, Lieutenant Commander, you don't want to see what happens when I decide to go freelance. Her communicator chimed with an incoming priority transmission. The message header identified it as coming directly from Federation Command on Earth. General Chen, came the voice of Admiral Harrison, the Federation's Chief of Naval Operations. We've received your reactivation request and reviewed the tactical reports from Haven 7. Consider yourself reinstated to active duty with full rank and privileges. Sarah smiled. She had served under Harrison during the war, and he understood better than most politicians what she was capable of when properly motivated. Thank you, Admiral. I assume my operational parameters are approved as well? With certain modifications. You'll have a small task force, 3 cruisers and supporting vessels. Your mission is to patrol the Outer Rim territories and prevent future Imperial incursions against civilian targets. Understood, sir. General, I need to be clear about something. This authorization comes with strict limitations. You are not to initiate offensive operations against Imperial territory. You are not to engage Imperial military forces unless they are actively threatening civilians. And you are absolutely not to attempt any kind of personal vendetta against the Empire. Sarah's expression didn't change, but Rodriguez noticed that her hand had moved instinctively toward where her sidearm would normally be holstered. Of course, Admiral. I understand my limitations. I hope you do, General. Because if you step outside your authority, the Federation will not be able to protect you from the political consequences. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah and Rodriguez standing in the ruins of the farmhouse. In the distance, they could see Marcus and Elena playing near one of the Federation rescue ships, their laughter carrying across the devastated landscape. You're really going to do this, Rodriguez said. It wasn't a question. The Empire killed my neighbors, Sarah replied quietly. They tried to kill my children. They destroyed everything I built here, everything I cared about. She looked up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to become visible in the approaching twilight. The Federation has given me 3 ships and authorization to protect human civilians from Imperial aggression. That's all I need. 3 ships against an entire empire. Sarah's smile was genuinely amused. Lieutenant Commander, I once destroyed 4 Imperial dreadnoughts with a single cruiser. I held off 3 battle fleets for 8 months with a force smaller than what I'm being given now. She gestured toward the hidden weapons platforms that were still tracking across the evening sky. Besides, I'm not planning to fight the Empire ship to ship. I'm planning to teach them that there are consequences for murdering human children. Rodriguez felt another chill, because she was beginning to understand what Sarah really meant. The Iron Fist wasn't planning to defend human territory from Imperial aggression. She was planning to take the war to them. 6 months later, the Galactic Empire was learning to fear the dark spaces between stars. Sarah's task force operated like phantoms, appearing without warning at the edges of Imperial territory, striking with surgical precision, and vanishing before enemy reinforcements could arrive. She had named her flagship the Haven's Revenge, and its reputation spread through Imperial space like wildfire. The pattern was always the same. Imperial forces would move against human civilian targets, a mining colony here, a research station there, and within hours they would find themselves facing the wrath of the Iron Fist. Sarah's ships never engaged in fair fights or honorable combat. They used stealth technology, overwhelming firepower, and psychological warfare to maximum effect. The Empire's response had been predictable and futile. They had increased patrols, reinforced border stations, and issued standing orders for all Imperial commanders to avoid engagement with Federation task forces. But Sarah wasn't operating like a conventional military unit. She was fighting a terror campaign, and the Empire's traditional defensive strategies were useless against her tactics. Standing on the bridge of Haven's Revenge, Sarah watched the tactical display showing their latest target, an Imperial supply depot that had been used to stage the genocide operation against the Kepler colony 2 weeks earlier. Intelligence reports indicated that the same punishment fleet units responsible for Haven 7 were being resupplied here. "General, we're detecting increased Imperial patrol activity in this sector," reported Commander Jackson, her tactical officer. "They've got early warning sensors throughout the system." "Then we'll have to disable those sensors before we attack," Sarah replied calmly. "How long until Marcus and Elena's school transmission?" 20 minutes, ma'am," Sarah nodded. Even in the middle of a military campaign, she made time for her children. They were safe on a Federation core world now, attending the best schools available, and receiving counseling to help them process what they had witnessed on Haven 7. But she spoke to them every day, maintaining the connection that kept her anchored to her humanity. Because without that anchor, Sarah knew she would become something far worse than the Empire's most feared enemies. "Ma'am, incoming priority transmission from Imperial Command," announced the communications officer. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of Grand Admiral Vex, the Empire's supreme military commander. He was an imposing figure, even by Imperial standards, with cybernetic implants covering half his face and cold artificial eyes that betrayed no emotion. "General Chen," he said without preamble, "we need to talk." "I'm listening, Admiral." "Your campaign of terrorism against Imperial interests has gone on long enough. The Hegemony Council is prepared to offer terms for a ceasefire." Sarah's expression didn't change, but every officer on the bridge felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "Terms?" she said pleasantly. "What terms might those be?" "Immediate cessation of all hostile activities against Imperial forces. Withdrawal of your task force to Federation space. In exchange, the Empire will formally acknowledge the Haven 7 incident as a violation of the peace treaty and provide compensation to the families of the victims." "How much compensation?" 50,000 credits per civilian casualty. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Sarah stared at the Grand Admiral for a long moment, her face completely expressionless. 50,000 credits, she repeated slowly, for each murdered child. The offer is generous, considering that those colonists were in violation of Imperial territorial claims. Sarah's laugh was soft and genuinely amused, which somehow made it more terrifying than any scream of rage. "Admiral, let me make sure I understand your position. You're offering to pay me approximately the cost of a used cargo shuttle for each innocent person your forces murdered, and you consider this generous." "The Empire is not in the habit of negotiating with terrorists, General. This offer represents a significant compromise on our part." "You're absolutely right," Sarah agreed. "The Empire shouldn't negotiate with terrorists. Unfortunately, you seem to be confused about which one of us fits that description." She gestured to her tactical officer, who began uploading data to the Imperial communication system. "I'm sending you a complete tactical analysis of your supply depot's defensive capabilities. As you can see, your shields won't stop my penetrator warheads. Your fighters can't catch my stealth ships, and your ground-based weapons can't track targets moving at the speeds my task force achieves." The Grand Admiral's artificial eyes flickered as he processed the data. His expression remained neutral, but Sarah could see the calculations running behind those cybernetic implants. You're planning to attack the depot regardless of our offer. Oh. Admiral, I'm not planning to attack your depot. Sarah's smile was radiant and completely terrifying. I'm planning to erase it from existence, along with every ship, every soldier, and every piece of equipment currently stationed there. That would be an act of war against the Galactic Empire. No, Admiral. That would be justice for the children your punishment fleets murdered. Sarah cut the transmission and turned to her tactical officer. Commander Jackson, status on the stealth mines? Deployed and armed, ma'am. The Imperial Supply Depot is completely surrounded. When you give the word, we can detonate the entire grid simultaneously. Sarah had been planning this operation for weeks. While the Imperial forces focused on detecting incoming ships, her engineers had been seeding the space around the depot with cloaked antimatter mines. Each device was no larger than a coffee cup, but together they carried enough destructive power to vaporize everything within a 50-kilometer radius. Ma'am, the Imperial fleet is beginning to scramble, reported the sensor officer. They're launching fighters and moving to intercept positions. Too late, Sarah said calmly. They should have thought about the consequences before they decided to murder my neighbors. Her communicator chimed with an incoming transmission from Marcus and Elena. Sarah accepted the call, and the main screen filled with the faces of her children, smiling and excited to tell her about their day at school. Mom, guess what happened in science class today? Elena said eagerly. Tell me all about it, sweetheart. For the next 15 minutes, Sarah listened to her children talk about their studies, their friends, and their dreams for the future. She asked questions about their homework, reminded them to eat their vegetables, and told them how proud she was of their accomplishments. To anyone watching, she looked like nothing more than a concerned mother having a conversation with her kids. The Imperial forces at the supply depot had no idea that they were about to die. I love you both so much, Sarah said as the call ended. Be good for your teachers and I'll talk to you tomorrow. We love you too, Mom. Both children called out before the transmission ended. Sarah sat quietly for a moment, remembering the morning on Haven 7 when Marcus and Elena had been chasing butterflies through the wheat fields. They had been so innocent then, so trusting, so completely unaware that there were people in the galaxy who would murder children for political advantage. Commander Jackson, she said finally, detonate the mines. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The Imperial Supply Depot, along with 47 ships and over 12,000 soldiers, simply ceased to exist in a ball of antimatter fire that briefly outshone the system's star. Sarah watched the tactical display show the expanding cloud of debris that had once been an Imperial military installation. No escape pods, no survivors, no witnesses except for the long-range sensors that had recorded everything. Ma'am, we're receiving transmissions from the Imperial fleet, reported the communications officer. They're demanding to know what happened. Tell them, Sarah said calmly, that the Iron Fist sends her regards. She stood up from the command chair and walked to the forward observation deck, where she could see the stars stretching away into infinity. Somewhere out there, Marcus and Elena were safe and happy, growing up in a world where they would never have to fear Imperial punishment fleets. And somewhere else, Grand Admiral Vex was beginning to understand that the Galactic Empire had made an enemy who would never stop, never forgive and never show mercy to those who threatened human children. The war was just beginning, but this time, humanity wouldn't be fighting to defend territory or resources or political principles. This time, humanity would be fighting for something far more dangerous, a mother's love.